Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Tuesday, October 15th. I'm Elizabeth Arcalian. Coming up, it's a race to the middle in this highly competitive Central Valley House race.
I am a Republican, but when it comes to serving Kern County specifically, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. I want somebody who's going to do work in my city and get some results.
KVPR's Joshua Yeager reports on Democrats' efforts to unseat Republican incumbent David Valadao. But first, today's headlines. Californians will vote on 10 statewide ballot propositions this fall. Proposition 3 would enshrine the right to same-sex marriage in the California Constitution. U.S. Delayou from our California newsroom partner Cal Matters has this explainer.
While same-sex marriage has been legal in California for more than a decade, the state constitution still says it's prohibited. That's because of another proposition, Prop 8. Back in 2008, California voters approved that measure, which defined marriage as strictly between a man and a woman. When the U.S. Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage nationwide, Prop 8 became a zombie law, virtually unenforceable, but still on the books. Proposition 3 on this year's ballot would officially repeal the zombie law, on top of making same-sex marriage a constitutional right. Supporters say this will give extra protection to same-sex marriage in California in case the U.S. Supreme Court outlaws it in the future. Opponents say the measure goes too far and would override marriage laws in the state.
That was U.S. Delayou with Cal Matters. Governor Gavin Newsom's administration is helping displaced oil and gas workers in Kern County train for jobs in other industries. The governor's office has awarded more than $11 million that will go toward providing training. According to the governor's office, around 750 residents have either lost their jobs or are in danger of losing their jobs as the state looks to transition away from fossil fuels. The money may go toward college tuition, job training, and even relocation out of the state. California officials are backing Kern River advocates who want water flows to return after thousands of fish died from low levels. Earlier this fall, a professor from Cal State Bakersfield noticed the low river levels when conducting a survey with her students. By September, students counted over 3,000 dead fish in a largely dry section of the river. State officials and Attorney General Rob Bonta are now joining a legal effort that would compel Bakersfield and other agricultural water districts to bring water back to the river. A Fresno State professor has patented a device aimed at helping firefighters save more lives. Associate Professor Hovhannes Kulhajian created an AI device that will specifically help firefighters see animals and people through heavy smoke. Kulhajian told news outlets the device will use an infrared camera and microphones to locate the human or animal and will eventually become a handheld object. We're several weeks away from Halloween, and you might already be thinking about your costume. A new tool shared by Google is already predicting some of the popular ones you might see this year. KVPR's Rachel Livenall helps us get in the spirit.
When trick-or-treaters come to your door on Halloween night, you might see a range of costumes and characters. The website Fright Guys compiled popular go-to costumes from all over the country. In the Valley, data shows people love to dress up as the wizard Harry Potter or the fairy Tinkerbell. But not all Valley costumes are good-natured. Some plan to mimic Chucky, the evil doll, or the supervillain, the Mad Hatter. If you don't yet know what to dress up as this Halloween, across the country, Fright Guys data shows people tend to go with costumes that are in line with current trends. So don't be afraid if you see the infamous Olympic Australian breakdancer Ray Gun prancing around your street. No matter the dress up this Halloween, you and those who show up at your doorstep are either in for a trick or a treat. For KVPR News, I'm Rachel Livenall.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Fresno Mazda, a member of the Prieto Automotive family, celebrating the grand opening of the newly renovated showroom on Thursday, October 24th. This all-ages event features live music, refreshments, and a gift for the first 100 guests. myfresnomazda.com.
And now to our main story. Voters in California's 22nd Congressional District say they're feeling deja vu. 2 years ago, Republican incumbent David Valadao narrowly defeated the Democratic challenger Rudy Salas in this district that includes parts of Kern, Tulare, and Kings counties. Now, the two are back at it for a rematch. And once again, the stakes are enormous. As KVPR's Joshua Yeager reports, the winner could determine which party controls a deeply divided House of Representatives.
Mailboxes stuffed full of political brochures, billboards plastered along the freeway, and TV ads rolling nonstop.
I'm Rudy Salas, and I'm running to represent you in Congress.
David Valadao, helping families, fighting for the Central Valley.
The race for California's 22nd District is one of the most competitive in the country. But you wouldn't know it from the voter turnout data. It counted the third fewest ballots nationwide in 2022. That's something Democratic canvassers like Noe Garcia are hoping to change this year. He recently came out to an upbeat training event.
We know that we can win it if we get our community to vote.
Biden carried this district by 14 points in 2020, and the party holds a 16-point advantage among registered voters. Yet a Republican, David Valadao, has represented the region for most of the past decade. It's a frustrating fact for Garcia, who is hopeful changes at the top of the Democratic ticket will entice more people to turn out this election.
With Kamala, people were actually more engaged and interested in politics. And I remember we were canvassing in the summer when Joe Biden was there, and people were like, I'm not voting for either one of them.
But there's no guarantee greater turnout will work in Democrats' favor. That's because Valadao is no ordinary Republican. The incumbent is one of just 10 who voted to impeach President Donald Trump for his involvement in the January 6th insurrection.
I'm going to let history decide how that vote plays out.
At the district's one and only debate earlier this month, he declined to give his pick for president.
Any mention of who I'm voting for is going to be perceived as an endorsement, and so I've chosen to run my own race, focus on the 22nd Congressional District.
The Hanford Dairyman has sought to sidestep the kind of culture war talking points the GOP has made central to its national platform this election. For example, he walked back previous support for an exception-free 15-week abortion ban and spoke about the need for immigration reform.
I've always been an advocate for immigration, especially immigration reform, because we have a process that's been broken for a long period of time.
Likewise, Democratic challenger Rudy Salas broke from his party in meaningful ways as a Bakersfield assemblyman. In 2017, he was the lone Democrat to oppose a controversial gas tax.
I took a beating for it. I lost my chairmanship over it. I was punished for standing up for Central Valley families.
On a recent Tuesday, Sharon Nichols sips champagne with her friends at Don Pepe's, a Mexican restaurant in Shafter. They're celebrating an important anniversary, 60 years as best buds. Nichols says she's voting for Valadao, not because of his party, but because she wants the candidate who can do the most for her rural community, which has struggled with homelessness and crime.
I am a Republican, but when it comes to serving Kern County specifically, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. I want somebody who's going to do work in my city and get some results.
Her friends nod vigorously at this. Their political views may differ, but here they all agree.
I don't have anything really against Rudy, to be honest. I just don't have a lot to turn the tide the other way. You know, there's nothing he's done that would convince me to vote for him.
With just a few weeks to go until Election Day, polls show Salas with the slightest of edges. And if Democrats want to flip this purplest of districts, they'll have to give voters like Nickel a reason to do it, and the tens of thousands more who choose year after year to simply stay home. For KVPR News, I'm Joshua Yeager in Shafter.
And KVPR's Joshua Yeager joins me now to discuss his reporting a little further. Hey, Joshua.
Hey, Liz.
Now, what stood out to me about your reporting is that Valadao and Salas seem willing to push back against their own party when they feel it's the right thing to do. When you were talking with folks from the 22nd District, did any of them have comments on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think voters in this district tend to reject the sort of partisan politics that have dominated the national conversation in recent weeks and months. I consistently hear from people here that they're not so concerned about those big ticket items like abortion or immigration, and instead they want a candidate who can deliver on more meat and potato issues like inflation, cost of living, gas prices, employment, all of those things. But it's, a fine line to walk because Valadao was nearly primaried by a pro-Trump or MAGA candidate earlier this year. This is a district that, on paper at least, leans heavily Democratic and supported Biden overwhelmingly.
Last week, we spoke with one of our colleagues, Rachel Livenall, who's covering another competitive nearby race, District 13. That's between Republican incumbent John Duarte and Democrat Adam Gray. Rachel had talked about just the large amounts of money being poured into that race. Is that also the case with this Valadao-Salas matchup?
It's definitely the case in this race as well. Salas, along with Gray, both raised more than $2 million this past cycle. And ads here in the Valley are cheap. So you get a lot of bang for your buck here, so to speak. And the result of that is just like a flood of TV spots, political mailers, billboards, etc. It's really like a torrent of advertisements here in these competitive districts. And then you also have prominent Republicans stumping for Valadao here in Bakersfield just this past week. You had both the Speaker of the House and the Senate Republican leader in town fundraising for Valadao. So that's definitely a bridge they're trying to gap.
You also, in your story, talk about voter turnout. Have you heard from election officials at all about why voter turnout is so low?
Well, this district has some of the lowest voter participation in the country. I mean, I think it counted the third fewest ballots nationwide in 2022. As we reported in the piece. Some reasons for that, from what I've heard from canvassers, for example, include, this is a majority Latino district. There are a lot of mixed status families, like farm worker families in this region. And because of that, there's sometimes a lot of hesitancy around voting. There's a perception that maybe if people who were formerly undocumented vote, that could hurt them or hurt their families who are maybe undocumented. So it just creates sort of a trend where voting is not maybe prioritized by residents here. But, that's something that people on both sides of the aisle are trying to change by educating, voters about their rights and how to register. And also, this is a presidential election, which historically means greater turnouts.
Anything else you'd like to share, Joshua?
Yeah, well, I think it's just worth reiterating that this is like a true toss-up district, and there aren't very many of those anymore. So, polls have these candidates neck and neck, with Salas ahead by 4% or 0.4%, depending on the poll that you look at. And those are both within the margin of errors. So it's really anyone's guess who will win come November. And I'm looking forward to covering it.
KVPR's Joshua Yeager, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Liz.
And that does it for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you've been hearing, help support the show by leaving a 5-star rating in your podcast app. Even better, share the podcast with a friend. We really appreciate it. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.